You're watching How to Be a Better Human. I am your host, Chris Duffy, and today on the show, we're talking about writing. Now, I write professionally, but really the main way that I write is every morning I try and journal. I've been doing this for years, and look, a lot of my material is not Pulitzer Prize worthy entries, okay? I'm journaling about how much I don't want to journal or how much I need to clean my desk. But occasionally, I will go back to an old journal entry. Most of the time, they're not stuff that I would ever want to read again, but sometimes that source of raw material is so interesting, and it can help me in what I think is maybe the biggest reason why I journal, which is to put words onto the page and then to figure out what I think, to process my life. Today's guest, Ashley C. Ford, is one of the absolute best people in the world at this. She is the author of the best-selling memoir, Somebody's Daughter. It's about Ashley's childhood. It's about growing up with a father who was incarcerated. It's about dealing with abuse and violence. But most of all, it is a book that is about the value of writing truthfully, about yourself and about the people you love. So today on the show, we are talking about why we write, how we write, and what that can tell us about ourselves and about the truth.
Hi, I'm Ashley C. Ford, author and podcast host. I'm so excited to be here and can't wait to talk.
You have this way of capturing imagery in writing that's so vivid, especially imagery of like being a young kid and these like really powerful moments. How do you, as a writer, like mine your own experiences, but also how does that change the way that you remember them?
You know, memoir for me is about what we remember. At its core, it's about what does this individual person remember about their lives? What is the lens that they filter that memory through? How do you choose to share that memory? Do you choose to share that memory? How much do you trust your memory? All of those things, right? And my relationship with my memory has been one that is both a blessing and a curse. I remember colors. I remember details. I remember what people were wearing. I remember the pitch of their voices. I remember the pitch of the voices behind their voices, you know, all of those things. It's like being back in that moment. And there are a few reasons why I think that's the case. One of those reasons is my eyesight. I have really, really terrible eyesight. And I do mean terrible, legally blind without my glasses eyesight. And I spent most of my life, up until around fourth grade, not having glasses, even though my eyesight was that bad. And I sort of dealt with that by memorizing where things were, memorizing details that could be seen in a fuzzy way and not necessarily clearly. So that's part of it. Another part of it is that I come from what I call the hook generation of kids. You know, I grew up on films that very much held on to the plot point that something happened in adulthood. Something was lost in adulthood. They'd forgotten what it was like to be children. They'd forgotten what they knew when they were children in order to survive in the world. And that had caused them to become adults who hurt children. So yeah, when I'm writing memory, I'm writing from this very personal experience of memory that as I think about it, you know, more as I grow, I see all these moments that changed how I memorize things and how I share things.
I write for almost the exact opposite reason, which is like I write things down. I'm really like big into journaling and writing because if I don't, they just disappear, right? Like the narratives that stay for me are the narratives that are like ones that I tell or that other people around me tell over and over. And so I have this real sense that like my memory is a shifting sand and it is not necessarily reliable.
And I have written and talked very much about the fact that I remember deciding to make memories as a child. I remember having these moments and saying to myself, this is one of those things you've got to hold on to because this is going to help you make sure you're the person that you want to be as you get older and that you're not just doing things because that's what other people are doing or because someone else says that that's what's right. If you remember this moment right now, then it will protect you from a future version of yourself who doesn't care. I also had this thing where I was convinced when I was a kid that I was supposed to be able to remember my father, who had truly only been in my life for 6 or 7 months before he went to prison. But I felt guilty about not being able to remember him.
I want to talk a little bit more about that, like making memory as a way of shaping who you want to be? Because that strikes me as something that really we could all be doing. And I think I'm at least so rarely conscious of that, of being like, this is something I want to remember because I want to be like this or not be like this or care for people who go through this.
I knew I was going to grow up. I knew I was going to get older. I didn't know what happened to make adults so different from kids, but I knew that I liked the kid version of me. And I desperately wanted to hold on to her, even if other people didn't like her. The things I wanted to hold on to, I could keep in my mind. And so I made a memory, I guess, the way a child thinks to make a memory, which is to sit quietly and close your eyes, be in the moment, replay the moment in your head, and feel everything around you.
We're talking about it in the context of you being a child. Have you done this as an adult too? Have you done this recently, this idea of intentionally making memories?
The stakes feel different as an adult. I trust myself a lot more as an adult to be able to remember my values more than a specific moment to fuel me. And I find that I kind of like the surprise as an adult of remembering things that I did not expect to remember and that I didn't try to remember.
I think sometimes when people have written about tough experiences in their life, right? Like having your father be incarcerated, experiencing sexual assault, having like people in your life experience violence or you experiencing violence, people like only see you through the lens of like the very serious stuff. And you are also so funny and silly and joyful. So how have you changed like the way you think about like humor and silliness and just goofiness?
But I've always been, the jokester. I've always sort of been the class clown, the personality hire, if you will. I did stand-up comedy for years when I was in college and really loved it, and stopped mostly because I didn't like comedians very much, even though I loved doing comedy. It's been the thing that helped me form most of my relationships from the beginning, my friendships. It's the reason why my teachers and professors loved me, even though I was not always doing great in their classes. It really greases a lot of wheels to be a person who, makes people laugh in general. And since the book has come out, one of the trickiest things has been having conversations with people who really want to talk to me from a place of, taking the issues that happened in my book seriously, which I do take seriously and I talk about and write about very seriously. But like most things in reality, it's complex. I get a lot of, I loved your book. I didn't expect you to be so bright. I didn't expect you to be so joyful. My husband, he tells people all the time when they go to buy the book or are questioning, whether or not they should get the book. He always says, you want to read it and you want to think about it, but just remember, she turns out okay. And this has been a great dichotomy in my life, that I've always, I think, like I said, been the funny person, been the person who can make people joke, but I've also always pretty easily made people cry. And even though now I accept the reality that both of those things are true about me, for a long time, I couldn't believe that anybody thought I was funny enough to laugh. And I couldn't believe that anybody thought what I said mattered enough to cry over it.
It feels like there's three really big virtues that are kind of in communication here, right? Like honesty, creativity, and perseverance. There's a way in which those three are really working together in your experience. And I think many people will find that like the more you're honest, the more creative you are. And the more creative you are, the more honest you can be. And then both of those things can help you persevere in a way that it would be a lot more difficult to persevere if you didn't have those two other things.
Absolutely. I mean, I think sometimes people will say to me, man, you're so brave to have written these things. And I want to tell them sometimes I'm not as brave as I am tired. And I don't have the energy, literally, to pretend and to keep up a charade. I don't have it. I can't pretend that I don't see what I see. I can't pretend I don't hear what I hear. Some people can. Good for them. I can't do it. And in a lot of cases, I've tried to do it the other way. I've tried to do it what I thought was the easy way or what you think is the easy way. And I could not get motion. I couldn't get an inch forward. And a lot of times for me, and I think this is true for a lot of people, until you can be honest and start to create, you don't move. And stagnation to me feels worse than almost anything else.
I want to talk to you about a couple of passages in Somebody's Daughter, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
It's a conversation with your father that you have towards the end of the book. And he says, "Do me a favor, Ashley. When you write about you and me, just tell the truth, your truth. Don't worry about nobody's feelings, especially not mine. You got to be tough to tell your truth, but it's the only thing worth doing next to loving somebody." I'm just curious how that passage has changed in meaning, or if it has changed in meaning since the book has been published.
You know, I wrote those words because of what they meant to me at the time, which was that my story was mine. And I had to be able to respect and honor the voice of my child self enough to let her speak without tempering it with the feelings and concerns of the adults who loved her, but could not show up for her. It's okay, you know, for me to tell that story. And I continue to feel that way, that it was okay for me to tell that story, that it's okay for me to continue to talk about that story. It's been an extremely positive experience, and it still means what I felt like it meant there, that my story is mine and it's worthy of being told, no matter who listens or who cares.
There's this passage also in Somebody's Daughter that I wanted to read because I thought it was such a fascinating moment where you're writing about yourself. You're a young kid, and it's your mom and your brother and you, and you're playing this game. Basically, the game is your mom turns off the lights and she says, "I'm not your mother," and then she gets one of you. And you say basically that you got scared that it actually wasn't your mother, that it was something else, and you run and you get a knife. And then this is what you wrote. "When she saw me standing there, 4 years old and more than ready to mortally wound her for daring to touch the person, your brother, I loved most in the world, she laughed. My mother laughed so hard she couldn't stop laughing. Her uncontrollable laughter made my brother and me laugh, and we laughed with her. The three of us fell to the floor, clutched our stomachs, and rolled around with laughter. My mother laughed until she wet herself, and then she laughed harder. That was the last time we played that game, but there were others." It really stuck with me, that moment, because it's so funny and it's so scary and tense, and there's so much nuance in that. And so I think, just selfishly, as a person who thinks about comedy and humor, I'm just really curious to hear what you think about like laughing hard and it maybe being a complicated laugh, because I think we don't talk a lot about complicated laughs.
Listen, complicated laughs are the story of my life. They are oh my gosh. First of all, I grew up in a house where laughter was very, very much encouraged. There was a lot of anger in my house and there was a lot of fear in my house, but there was also a lot of laughter. And those existed within moments of each other sometimes. And I noticed that a lot of the things that I read and a lot of things that I saw kept these experiences so separate. And that was not what I had lived. That was not my experience. There are many, I think, elements of the laughter, horror, fear, crying, like all of that. And a lot of it comes from like extreme emotion, but also a lot of it, at least in my opinion, in Black households, comes from a great reverence for absurd humor. When something is absurd, I mean, and just why would that happen? That's when we laugh the most and the hardest, because most things that are absurd should just be laughed at. They shouldn't be taken seriously, and they shouldn't be feared. They should be cackled at. You should be in stitches about that, not having to have fear or worry about it.
If someone is listening and they are really interested in writing nonfiction, especially creative nonfiction, but they're not quite sure how to go about it, they have some fear about delving into their personal stories, what advice would you give to someone who's thinking about writing about their own life?
Well, the first thing I would say is that writing and publishing are not the same thing. If you feel like you want to write about your life and you're not sure if that's something you want to share or publish, those decisions can come later. There's nothing that says because you write something, you have to give it to anyone, show it to anyone, or let anyone read it. Another thing I would say is that silence is not an equitable trade for love. People who need you to be silent about the way you hurt them in order for you to prove that you love them or forgive them are not people who are loving you very well in that request. It's a very human request to make, but it is not loving. We have to decide whether or not we can allow a person to put those kind of parameters on their love for us or on our love for them.
What is your personal definition of love and care?
My personal definition of love and care is extending kindness and compassion first and freely, and trusting that the accountability I hold the people I love to is mutual, and that they are able to hold me accountable in those same ways and for those same reasons. I don't think that because I love a person, I need to or have to deny the parts of them that may be flawed or wanting. I think, in fact, that loving them requires me to be honest with them about those things.
It also relates to, I know, something people ask you about a lot too, which is reconciliation.
You know, when people ask me about things like, how did you continue to love your dad after finding out what he did, after knowing who he had hurt? And the truth is, I mean, I can't really tell you how. I can just tell you that I did. You know, it wasn't a matter of how do I go back to loving my dad? How do I hold on to my love for my dad? It was that my love for my dad never went away. All of these other things came in. The love was still there the whole time. I just stopped being ashamed of myself for loving him. I don't have to forget anything, and I don't have to forgive him for anything specific. I don't have to say I forgive you for what you did. I don't have to say I forgive you for who you hurt. A, I don't think I can forgive him for somebody else. And B, that's not what my forgiveness is. My forgiveness is you get to be part of my life. And we get to see what happens from here.
Ashley C. Ford, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Chris.
Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of How to Be a Better Human. Before you go, please click the like and subscribe button to get alerts on inspiring TED Talks and interviews. You can also head over to TED's own podcast channel, the TED Audio Collective, where we publish even more video podcasts. Thank you so much, and hope to see you soon.